My name is Spencer Chase. I'm the managing editor of Agri-Pulse. Also have the privilege of hosting Agri-Pulse Drive Time and Newsmakers. And all of you that tune in, I regret to inform you, this is what the face looks like that goes with the voice that so many of you have heard. Always appreciate hearing from folks that hear that inform me that Agri-Pulse is such a key part of their day. We appreciate you sticking with us throughout these last 20 years. I'm going to make myself pretty scarce here because I know, frankly, you all didn't come here to listen to me. You came here to listen to the folks that are on the stage to my left. But as Sarah mentioned, and this will be kind of a recurring theme throughout the day, the introductions that you hear from this stage are basically so you know which face goes to which name in your programs. Full biographies are going to be available elsewhere. We just want to make sure you know who is who before the discussion kicks off. So from my far left, your far right, we've got Darin Riggs, the co-founder of Riggs Beer Company. Next to Darin, we've got Kyle Mohler, the founder and CEO of Insignum AgTech. Next is John Wepking, the founder of Meadowlark Farm and Mill. And last but certainly not least, Kevin Johansen, the founder of AgButler. So let's kick off our conversation. And I think what's really important about this panel is it really will set the tone for what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the day. We're talking about rural entrepreneurship. We're talking about taking that next step. And I think it's important for us to hear from four folks that have gone and done just that. And so to kick off our conversation, Darin, I'm going to pick on you first, and we'll work the way back toward me across the stage. I think it's important for everybody to just hear, tell us a little bit about your business, what y'all do, and how things have been going for you.
All right, thanks. Darin Riggs, Riggs Beer Company in Champaign County, Illinois. Grew up on a small family-operated corn and soybean farm, pretty normal for central Illinois, but small enough that Dad and Mom didn't farm for a living, so the story was growing up, find something else to do, and maybe you can farm for a hobby. And so went to college, discovered beer, and
that'll actually be a Slido question for later.
Yeah.
At what age did we all discover beer? Yes.
And then somebody told us, hey, beer is made from grain and water, and we're like, wow, we did grain. How hard could that be? Turns out a little harder than we thought it was going to be. But spent some time in the military to pay for college, and then got out and said, hey, let's give this a shot. So worked for somebody else for a while. My brother actually went to Germany and studied German brewing. I worked for a little brewery out in California. Somebody might have heard of in the room. Anheuser-Busch, anybody? Okay. Yeah. So worked for a big brewery, and then moved back home and told Dad, hey, we'd like to grow barley in Central Illinois. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know anything about that, so you boys better do it. So that was kind of the introduction to growing something weird on the farm, and then started our brewery there, and it's been doing pretty well.
So I started a biotech company called Insignum AgTech. We are located in central Indiana. I was raised on a farm there in central Indiana as well. Corn and soybean farm, but I didn't want to get back to the farm, and so I studied biochemistry, did a PhD over in Scotland, and was back in Indiana, still in academia, when I came up with this concept that eventually became Insignum AgTech. So we create new genes out of plant DNA that enable the crops to use their pigments to talk to you. So our first piece of technology enables corn leaves to turn purple in the very early stage of disease so that farmers can treat exactly when and where, but only if they actually need to. Farmers really love that it is visible and physical. It's not me as a startup trying to tell them that I know how to grow their crops better than they do. That never goes over very well. But since it's a simple color change, all we need is a color camera to pick it up, so we can use any kind of drone or satellite or airplane or camera that's mounted on a piece of equipment to pick up these color changes. In the future, we want to use multiple colors to signal for multiple different problems, right? So red or blue or purple to signal for diseases or insect attack or low fertility, so that farmers can get a color-coded readout of whatever's going wrong at any given time to sustainably optimize their production. how it's going is it's going pretty well. We've got some good partnerships. We've gotten some funding, and we're alive, which is a really good thing in startup VC-backed startup world right now. So yeah, I'm happy with where we are. Yeah.
Very good, John.
I'm John Wepking. My wife Hallie and I own Meadowlark Organics Farm and Meadowlark Community Mill in Ridgway, Wisconsin, which is in southwest Wisconsin on the highway between Madison and Dubuque, Iowa. We are about a 1,000-acre certified organic diversified grain farm, and we also raise cow-calf grass-fed beef. We farm in an area, the driftless area, which is the whole farm is basically ridgetop, highly erodible because it was unglaciated in the last ice age 10,000 years ago. So not the typical flat prairie soils of most of the Midwest, but very fragile, highly erodible, slopey ground. So you can grow, and a lot of our neighbors grow corn and soybeans very successfully there, but we felt like the best way that we could be stewards of the land we farm is to inject a lot of diversity, and the best way that we thought of to do that was to start value adding more diverse grains. We're off the map for most food grade wheat production, but we have discovered that the ridge tops of the driftless are actually an excellent climate for growing food grade wheat, but there are no buyers local. So over a number of years, we got a USDA VAPG grant to launch our brand and work with a toll miller, and then at the end of that, our toll miller wanted to retire, so we purchased his milling equipment and built a flour mill on the farm. I had come from a bit of a farming background in that area, but my wife and I actually met working as cooks, chefs in restaurant kitchens in New York City. So when we came back and started working on Paul Bickford's farm, who hired us on this 1,000-acre farm, we brought a commitment to wanting to raise, grains on that scale, but with consumers, chefs, bakers in mind. So we brought that skill set into it, and that really gave us a leg up when it came time to trying to launch a business and get people on our side.
Well, good morning, everyone. Kevin Johansen, founder of AgButler. I'm a fifth-generation farmer. We currently have 3 farms that are century farms within our families. My wife's family and my own family, and 2 of the century farms are still being operated by families today. My wife and I run about 300 head of seed stock cattle and 200 acres of hay, and then my cousins run the row crops up in central Missouri. We started AgButler coming up on 6 years ago, basically because ag labor has always been an issue, especially in rural areas, much like what Darin mentioned, to go find something else other than agriculture. We've had a depopulation of rural communities, and the stable workforce that was in those rural communities were the baby boomers, and a number of them are retiring, or we're losing them every day. So instead of continuing to kick the can down the road, we decided to develop an app and a web-based platform that connects people in rural communities to production agriculture and the farmers and ranchers that need that additional labor. And we were able to build that because we got a Missouri small business grant through the Missouri Department of Agriculture, and some small funding from friends and family, as well as competitions that we pitched at, most notably American Farm Bureau Ag Innovation Challenge and a couple other smaller AgTech startup pitch companies. And so we've been working on AgButler fully for the last 3 years. We did start our ag labor platform right in the middle of COVID, so we took a big chance on saying, hey, have a stranger come to your farming operation and help you do production agriculture. But once we were able to get through that wave, we've had 42 states on our platform and over 3,000 users.
Very good. So, folks, as you can hear, four pretty different businesses, very different stories that we've got going on up here. And frankly, I could probably fill the rest of the time of this conversation talking to any one of these folks. And I do have a few questions of my own. Would encourage all of you, as questions emerge in your mind, please do feel free to use Slido to get those questions submitted. Would love to have some audience engagement as part of this discussion as well. But let's work back the other way across the stage, and I'll start with you on this one, Kevin. We look at the theme of the discussion here today, the theme of the panel here today, talking about that entrepreneurship piece, but in rural America. I wonder if you could speak to the benefits, but also the challenges that you've observed over the course of your respective businesses, given the geography of where you're at, and that living and working in rural America, and the role that that's played in your kind of entrepreneurial journey.
The obvious and most challenging one is capital. So we were able to start AgButler just based off of an idea. And you can ask my wife that I've had a lot of ideas, and this was the only one that took a little traction to go outside of the state of Missouri. But we were also able to start it because of a local hometown bank that I worked with since I was a kid. Was our first investor, really. And so having that great relationship with my local bank that gave us some runway to get started, because our whole team was not tech savvy. We did what we knew how to do and built a brand and a narrative about what the business should be like. And then we went out and found a really good development team that had connections to agriculture to let us do that. So obviously the biggest challenge is the capital and getting funding for that. But there's a ton of entrepreneurs throughout rural communities, because farmers and ranchers can probably invent or make something out of duct tape and baling twine. And there's a lot of those tools and services out there that people just don't take the next step because of working capital.
Speaking similarly, grain farming, obviously, and flour milling on top of it is very capital intensive. So we've, luckily we did have the USDA VAPG grant, but we also, had to take on a lot of debt to build up the grain storage infrastructure. We have our own, the farm basically is completely vertically integrated. So we're growing a diversity of grains for the flour mill. We're also growing feed grains for organic corn and soy and hay and things like that. But we're also buying in grain from our neighbors and blending lots of wheat to get consistent protein for our bakers and things like that. So we're bringing in grain, we're harvesting our own grain, everything's being binned, we're running it through our own on-farm cleaning facility, putting it in super sack totes, running it across the driveway to the flour mill, where we mill it, put it in bags, up to, usually 50-pound bags that go on our own delivery truck, and we self-distribute into Chicago and Milwaukee and Madison and La Crosse, and then ship to other places in the region. But because we're doing all of that, it was a big ask, and we were doing something that Farm Credit, Compeer in our case, wasn't their underwriters weren't, they didn't know what it meant to put spelt on our balance sheet at $1 a pound, or buckwheat, or some of these other crops, and they certainly didn't understand the economics of a flour mill. So it took us a period of years to first borrow to get the grain cleaning built, and then prove that over a few years, and then work up to the flour mill. But we were able to basically do all of our fundraising through the farm credit system.
So struggles and benefits of being in rural America for a scientific company like mine are, lots of different things. So first of all, I'll talk about the people, right? Being a plant science company, when I try and hire scientists, they oftentimes come out of the coast, right? That's where the big biotech hotspots are, Boston and San Francisco. But the people that really enjoy working with plants enjoy working where they can see fields and trees and are not sitting in commutes all day long. And so we've been very fortunate to be able to hire people off the East Coast to come to rural Indiana to work. And that's been very fortunate for us. Also, to build technology in plants, it's great that we are around our customers all the time. Compared to trying to develop a plant technology in San Francisco, I mean, we can just access our customers really easily, and not only farmers but the entire supply chain is all very accessible to us. And so it's a huge advantage being in Central Indiana to try and develop a piece of technology like what we're doing. Challenges are capital, like these guys have said. That's a huge limiting factor. And for an early stage company that where we don't have anything to back loans, it's very risky investments, and so a lot of those are built on relationships. And so, that's one thing that we're certainly lacking is that infrastructure for venture capital or other risky types of investments. We've been really fortunate to have some solid investors so far, but in order to continue to grow, we need to develop those relationships further and really look outside of Indiana, look outside of the Midwest to try and find those funding sources.
So starting a brewery, bankers they knew what that meant. We did use an SBA loan when we started up the brewery and the tap room in order to get the equipment that we needed to get started. We've since transitioned that to just a standard business loan because the SBA has those floating interest rates, and so we got that fortunately locked down before things jumped up there. So there was as said before, getting the capital to start up was definitely part of it. I gave my dad a hard time because he thought we were crazy wanting to grow barley, and maybe we are. But having even a small family farm was a huge help, right? Because we already had the tractors, we had the wagons, we had he's like, okay, here's 5 acres, do whatever you want with it. But we already had that land, and with the way prices are nowadays, that's not something that you can just discount if you're starting this new business. So the farm is still technically owned by my parents and my aunt, and so the struggle, so to speak, has been we left for a long time, left the farm, did our own thing for a while, kind of like Dad told us to, and then came back, want to do all these weird things. It's been like a transition challenge of okay, hey, Dad, I'm 40. When am I going to start running the farm, right? That's the point that we've gotten to now, and this has been like I just finished up with the accountant the first year of books that I did by myself, taking over that side of the farm was something that when you're just thinking about I got this great idea, you're never thinking of those details of how that's going to work when you come back home and kind of the dynamics there, wanting to do something different with the farm.
This question, popcorn style, anybody take it to whoever wants it, but I do wonder, you all mentioned capital at some point or another in your answer. Is the financing that you have gotten been adequate? Is your business achieving the potential it could if you were able to have better access to capital, or has that been something that's been potentially a limiting factor for any of you?
Well, I probably have the lowest cost on a month-to-month ratio because all of mine is digital. And so what we were able to get capital-wise helped us get to the point to which we could establish an MVP and show that we get users and customers and get a broad awareness throughout the heartland of areas that definitely needed labor and access to labor. And then now we're to the point to where we have a proof of concept and know what we can do, to where we have to ask for a bigger chunk to be able to really scale and help most of the U.S. And so that's kind of where we're at, to where we fill out a lot of applications and have a lot of meetings, mostly on Zoom, with other investment groups to to show our worth and how we can scale up further.
So you're still actively soliciting capital at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Thoughts on, your thoughts on your access to capital and what that has meant for the capacity of your business?
So investment for us is absolutely the lifeblood of our business. We're on a trajectory that's something like drug development. So we're developing these genes, and we intend to license them to seed companies at some point down the road. And so we have no revenue, right? And we will not have revenue for years and years. So back to your question though, is that if do we have enough? I mean, I don't know a single entrepreneur that says they have enough capital. Well, of course we could always use more, but it's certainly been refining for us, right? So if we don't get the amount that we ask for, and we've got to scale back, then it means we're going to be doing the most important thing at the most important time, right? And so over the last year or two, it's been increasingly more and more difficult to access capital because the interest rates being higher means that a lot of high net worth individuals or other sources of funding has a very safe bet somewhere else, so they don't need to make risky bets into venture capital. And so a lot of that funding has been very limited. So I hope that we are coming through this period now, but we'll have to see. So it's been very limiting.
I would say the whole reason that we did the brewery thing to begin with is to capture all of the all that value from growing the grain in the field to the end consumer, right? And so we fortunately picked a industry or a fad maybe because we are kind of reaching peak breweries, I think, in the U.S. That we were able to keep a lot of that value. So once we got the startup capital to buy the building and buy the equipment for the brewery, we've been since year one, we've had a positive balance sheet. Now, with COVID and rising interest rates and stuff like that, we've been very cautious to only grow as much as cash flow will allow. So not taking out any more loans. We'd like to say, my brother and I started this business. We own 100% of the company. We don't have any other investors. We got a pretty nice little bank note that's going to be around for a while, but we're paying that off at a reasonable rate. And so being cautious and using that cash flow as the only means of expansion means we're not going to take over the world, but that was never the goal to begin with. We put our name on the company, so that kind of limits selling it off to Anheuser-Busch again. But it's always been a vehicle for what can we do to bring value back to the farm and keep it going for another generation.
I mean, I would echo a lot of what Darin just said. We were commiserating before about our grain cleaners. We both have air screen cleaners, fanning mills from the 1940s. I think I managed to be older than his by a couple of years, but so we have, because we've debt financed everything, but if we went in with the capital budget of a new grain elevator at the scale that we're running, which is we produce 10 to 15,000 pounds of product a week, which is a lot for a small farmer-owned stone mill, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to any large facility. So we have gotten resources in the form of loans, but that's also, we've managed to keep our costs lower on our construction projects by building it all with farm labor and using used equipment. And 6 of our 7 grain bins were used that we took down on a farm in Minnesota and put back up on our farm. And so we've been kind of cobbling it together, as farmers do. But at a certain point, as we're trying to grow the flour mill, I think we're kind of reaching that tipping point of like, okay, well, maybe we do need to look beyond traditional debt financing to try to get ourselves in a place where we don't quite feel like we're flying by the seat of our pants every day,
Let's talk labor. Obviously, being in small town America, you don't have as big of a labor pool to draw from. And John, I'll start with you on this one. How has the labor situation been and having adequate staffing at your businesses?
And in our case, I mean, we're running, a diverse organic grain farm. We do have cattle, and then we have the flour mill too. So we employ about a dozen people, about half and half between the farm and the mill. And the farm crew does all of the grain storage and grain cleaning. So there's a lot of year-round work that comes with that. The nice thing is we're never reliant on short-term or seasonal labor. There are obviously peaks and valleys in what we need to do on the farm and in the cropping. But we have so much other work to do on the farm that there's never really a slowdown. So that's really nice. So when we offer people work, it tends to be, full-time salary, this and that. But there's a really wide diversity of skills between the guy running the grain cleaner, the person. We're very lucky to have hired a stone miller who had 6 or 7 years of experience running stone mills at a mill bakery in Minneapolis. And so we've had a combination of local folks, but we have attracted people from not necessarily the coast, but other parts of the country who've been excited about what we want to do and have been willing to relocate.
Kevin, I'm going to come to you on the labor question last. I feel like it's a bit of a loaded topic for you. Kyle?
So as I mentioned earlier, that we've been really fortunate to be able to hire people and bring them into Indiana. So it's not been nearly as much of a challenge for us. One of the things that we have to do is tell our story to the people that we bring in, right? So not only about the customers or the farmers that we're going to help, the impact that we're going to have on the land. I think that's something that really resonates with the people that we bring in, and so. So it's been something that everybody can really get behind, and so part of the benefit of as well, I guess, of being cash tight is that we don't have to hire a dozen people, or we don't have enough cash to hire a dozen people. So we get really good small number of people. Yeah.
So being in the brewery's in a university town, which means got a lot of people coming through. So. It hasn't been as difficult to hire the brewery labor. There's a fair amount of turnover, like there would be in any industry, but we've really tried to manage that and kind of set as high as we can on the industry standards for pay and that sort of thing to retain people that we really like. On the farm side, let's just say our brewery hiring process says, have you ever driven a tractor before? So sometimes we are using on a quiet day at the brewery, we'll have those guys go down to the farm, and the farm reimburses the brewery for the labor, and so that's been really helpful for us to kind of have a ad hoc grain bin cleaner, pickup driver, that sort of thing. One guy even learned how to drive the chisel plow. So.
Good deal, Kevin. I mean, what about you as you're looking to? I imagine a lot of your, labor needs are probably a little bit more on the technology side. Have you been able to source that in rural America?
Yes. So as I said earlier, our whole team was not tech savvy enough to build a platform that we did, and so we were able to source a third-party developer that. The team lead was actually from a generational farm out in Benoit, Kansas, and so he found technology. So whenever he talked with his development team that is fractional for us, when we need them, he could translate ag to tech and then tech back to ag. So it was a great partnership as we built that. And the rest of the team is fairly fractional, but we utilized our knowledge and connections through ag marketing, ag communications to be able to get AgButler out to people. And we started AgButler as a seasonal part-time work, and then whenever farmers and ranchers realized that the mainstream job sites were not working for them, especially agribusinesses as well, because we marketed it to rural and farmers and ranchers, that they started putting full-time positions on our platform, as well as some internships. And so we've been able to utilize our team to be able to get more awareness of what AgButler's doing.
Well, folks, we've got a picture of the Capitol behind us. The White House is just a few blocks away. USDA and EPA are just down the street. We're in a town where policy is often leading the discussion. And so I do have to ask, as part of this conversation, what, if anything, could policymakers do? And Kevin, I'll start with you on this one and work our way back down. What, if anything, could policymakers do to make your lives easier from a business ownership standpoint, from a the business that you're in standpoint? What, if anything, could be done to make life easier on small town entrepreneurs?
I guess one of the things that our state has done for a lot of people that are not coming back to family farms, they've been able to make it to where producers that do not have a succession plan has an opening for people that are interested in being in production agriculture. For those individuals that are willing to take on those new individuals coming into production agriculture, get a tax incentive for that transition. It would be pretty nice to have a tax incentive as rural entrepreneurs, because we do have to take on a lot of debt, essentially, because of a line of credit or investing your own money into an entrepreneurship pathway to get kind of a payback on tax incentive. That would be one big thing. I mean, obviously free up more capital for rural entrepreneurship, but that'd be a bigger hurdle to jump over.
John, your thoughts?
Echoing that a little bit, we're still, I think this is my 8th year with a Schedule F, so I'm technically a beginning farmer still. But our path to farm, I didn't talk about this because it's a bit far afield, but we were hired onto a farm. And we've taken ownership of it now. Our boss mentor passed away a year and a half ago, but we had bought shares in the farm before that happened, and so we had a path to ownership. But I think it's obviously well worn to talk about the average age of farmers and how capital intensive and difficult it is to recruit young people to do this kind of work, but it's obviously an incredibly critical issue. And we were very lucky to find a very unique path into a farm that we have stake in. And it's increasingly a challenge to figure out how we can take that path and leverage it and use it as a model for other people in other farming situations. And we don't have the answers, obviously, but it's one of the hugest issues I think we face in agriculture right now.
Cal, your thoughts?
So there were two things that came to mind when you asked that question. So unique to anybody else on this panel, we have some regulatory hurdles to get through. Even though our technology, it doesn't use any foreign DNA in the plant, all plants have the ability to make pigments, right? Like the flowers you see in front of you, right? So if we could, just grab hold and use those pigments, we still need to go through a regulatory process. And there has been a lot of changes recently in the U.S. with something called the Secure Rule, and that's great. It's been helpful. I think there's still a little bit of feeling out about exactly how that's going to be implemented. And I think there's still a little bit of looking over, the regulators might be looking a little bit over their shoulder to be worried about what lawsuits might come if they rule one way or another. And so within this room, any support that we can give to them to say, hey, we've got your back, or you've got the funding you need to defend yourself against those lawsuits are going to be really helpful for us in that regard. But even more than that, the commodity crops that we're trying to get into are shared around the world and exported around the world. And so, of course, we don't have any direct influence on how other countries regulate their biotechnology, but we're certainly developing something here that has a huge benefit to the environment and to agriculture and to those communities as well. And so, if we can have conversations to try to grease those pathways, or to make it even more, not even more, to open up new markets that are going to be accepting towards gene editing or technology like we're developing, that's super critical. There are a lot of markets out there right now that are in flux. Some places that are talking about not buying U.S. grain anymore, and so we need to look to where we can open up new markets, right? And so we need to start that with a regulatory conversation as well as just a buy and sell and trade, right? And that has impacts on me right now, right? Because if our customers, like the seed companies or maybe our investors, feel like it's too risky that we may not be able to sell our products into the marketplace, right? Then that just changes that calculation for them a bit more. So the more guarantees or the more trust that they can have that we're going to be able to market this and that other countries are moving in the right direction, the better off it is and the more helpful it's going to be for us to bring our technology to market. Do I have time to go one more thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, so the second thing that came to mind was on the funding side. There are so we were really fortunate to be visited by the Small Business Administration Deputy Administrator here this last week to Indianapolis, and he was talking about the Small Business Investment Company program, right? The SBICs. They can either invest in established companies or in venture companies. To date, there are I think 300 of those investment companies. It's a program that's set up with a 2-to-1 match, private to public funding, and so it's state backed, but it's a revenue positive program. The definition of a public-private partnership. There are also rural business investment companies, RBICs. I mentioned earlier that there are 300 of those small business companies, and there are 10 rural business investment companies, or at least there were at the beginning of last year. The small business investment companies manage something like $40 billion. The rural business ones have $1 billion under management, right? So if you feel like that 40-to-1 ratio is a bit off, there's an opportunity to get that readjusted because those RBICs are funded through the Farm Bill. So yeah, we have an opportunity there to tip the balance in a different direction.
Darin?
All right, I haven't figured out the solution to this one, but there's a lot of smart people in this room, so maybe somebody here can. But agriculture in the last 20 years, like the way forward has been consolidation and getting bigger and bigger operations, and that's come at keeping prices down, making a lot of food, feeding the world. We've been teaching the world how to grow corn and soybeans. And guess what? They're starting to do it now. So now we find ourselves kind of a one-trick pony, especially in the area that I am. I know you're growing a lot more stuff up there in Wisconsin, but man, if you want to grow something besides corn and soybeans in Central Illinois, that's hard. If you want to find a anhydrous toolbar for an 8-row planter, that's hard. Finding small equipment for a 300-acre farm, they don't make it anymore. So we've consolidated, and we're going to kind of lose some of those markets. But during that consolidation, we've hollowed out a lot of rural America. I remember when our 300-person town had a grocery store and a gas station and this, that, and the other, and a lot of that stuff has left with a lot of people that left the farm and didn't come back. So what incentives can we provide to keep things more diverse, get more families back into farming? Farmers like to complain about absent landowners, right? Who are absent landowners? People who used to farm and don't farm anymore, and they went somewhere else, right? Because they got that ground somehow. So those are the people who've been pushed out of farming because it got too big for them. And going all the way to the consumer with a value-added product like beer was the only way that we could figure out to do something like that.
John, you look like you're looking to weigh in here.
I want to jump off this kind of quickly if I can. This was kind of the second point I wanted to make. Our business, we employ local people. We have our supply chain is remarkably tight, obviously, but the percentage of the dollar, the dollars that come from the value of the crops that we raise, you can't keep those dollars in the local community much better and more efficiently than we do. And we saw, obviously, in COVID with the empty grocery store shelves, of especially flour. We had people, this was just when we launched our online store, and we were hardly prepared for it, but we were packing orders in our basement and doing all sorts of crazy things like that. But people were asking for, 50, 100 pounds of flour because they wanted to stash it in their freezers because they were worried that it's like, we said, no, just buy 5 pounds and then buy another 5 pounds. Our bins are full. Our mill's right here. The electricity's not gone off. Like, in some ways, the system of running a bunch of small farmer-owned or independent regional mills is a lot less economically efficient than the system we have now, but in a lot of ways, it's a lot more resilient. And when you look at the externalities and the effects that it has on our rural communities, like a more economically inefficient system produces better outcomes, I think, for rural people.
Folks, we've got about a big 5 minutes left here, so I'm going to switch to some questions submitted by the audience, and I'd be curious, just any one of you in 30 or 40 seconds, what you can say on this subject. Is the local entrepreneurship support system providing sufficient guidance and tools for aspiring and existing rural entrepreneurs?
So one of the ones that I didn't mention was exactly this. It was called the E-Factory. It's based out of Springfield, Missouri, on Missouri State's campus, and them and another group out of Southeast Missouri joined forces and have released this new push called Innovate Southwest Missouri, to where there's a bunch of satellite locations for exactly this, in partnership with SBDC, to help rural entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in the smaller city town satellites to give those tools and services. And it wasn't up until the last couple of years that has happened. And so for us in Southwest Missouri, South Central Missouri, that is starting to grow because Missouri has saw that we've had a boost of entrepreneurs trying to provide value-added services and products in rural communities.
Another question from somebody who apparently has an eye into my television viewing habits. Given a way to possibly secure capital and bring light to the importance of agriculture and food production into the public eye, have any of the panelists considered going on Shark Tank?
We haven't, but one of our customers did, actually.
Oh.
There's a company, Long Table Pancakes, that was on Shark Tank twice, and their business really blew up. But what they were doing, their big innovation was they were putting popcorn flour into their pancake mixes, aside from the fact that they were sourcing from individual farms and they had a very regenerative minded supply chain, but they're actually popping corn and then milling it, which left a very obviously fluffy thing. So I didn't actually see the video of it, but he did, and it was a huge bump for it. And he did his best. He's not a farmer, but he was sourcing directly from farmers and was able to really grow his business through that channel.
Anyone else considering the tank? Any thoughts at this point?
Working with my brother's hard enough.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd do well with another investor.
Yeah, no, I don't think I want a shark in the boardroom.
Very good. A question, and I'll open this out to anyone that would like to answer it. If you were starting again today, what advice would you give to yourself that might have expedited your success?
Oh man, figure out how to write grant applications, because that's apparently the way that you get money from the government. I tried to do one here this past week, and it got so hard that I eventually I'm like, well, I'm just going to buy it. So if there's any way to simplify that process, or man, if the Farm Bureau would hold classes to teach us how to fill those forms out, that'd be helpful.
I would say to just go for it, just try it. Most likely, a lot of new ventures don't work out, and that's okay. But as long as you learn from it, right? So if you're thinking about it, just go for it, and don't be afraid to feel stupid when you're starting something new, because you're going to be, and that's fine.
Yeah, I would say along those same lines, just say yes. Like we ended up in the farming opportunity we did by just saying yes to doing a lot of hard work and cultivating 12 hours a day. And, like it just, if we would have said, oh, that farm's bigger than the farm, like in our imagination, we wanted to be on, 160 acres and have some cows. And it's like, this was bigger tractors, bigger equipment than anything I had ever dreamed of. And it was uncomfortable, but we said yes. And, 8 years later, we've had a lot, been able to have a big impact. If we didn't say yes to that initial opportunity, it would have been difficult to do what we've done.
Probably from our standpoint, probably would have taken the big step of going back to sole proprietorship from a full-time job that was separate from ag, doing sales and another deal, and then moonlighting AgButler on the side. Probably taking that step a little bit sooner to be, a year ahead to be able to grab a little bit more funding before it kind of went more conservative with COVID and everything else. But other than that, every step that we took was pretty strategic. And during that time when we were releasing, we had to be very flexible. So our business plan was a lot in pencil and paper because we had to erase and go a different route quite often during 2020 and 2021. But just taking that initial step a little bit sooner.
Well, folks, very often I watch panels like this, and then a few years later I think, man, I wonder how those folks are doing. So you all will be granted here 15 seconds apiece. We got about 60 seconds left on the panel. If folks are interested in following along with your business, your success story, if they want to keep an eye on how things are going in the future for you, what's the best way that they can do that? Website, social media, things like that. I'll start with Kevin and work the way down.
You can find AgButler at agbutlerapp.org. And then we are on all social media channels that you can find us. We typically run a bunch of campaigns based off of seasonal work, et cetera. But that's the easiest way to find us.
You can find us on, we're not as active on Instagram as we probably should be, but it's a good way to keep an eye on the farm and what we're doing. And we do have a website, meadowlarkorganics.com, and an online store. And we do, if you're quite far away, we tend to recommend people find the flour mills closer to them, but we are happy to ship anywhere in the country pretty much.
So as a farmer and a scientist, marketing is not my strong suit. So you can follow us on our website, or LinkedIn is the primary place that we put out new announcements.
Rigsbeer.com. Unfortunately, regulatory requirements for shipping beer are more difficult than flour, so you'll probably have to come to Illinois to get us. But you can also check us on Facebook. That's where we post all the glamour shots of the farm.
Good deal. Well, folks, what a lively discussion. I learned a lot, and I hope all of you did as well. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Well, as Sarah mentioned earlier, this is an event that would not be possible without the support of all of you, but also several great companies and organizations who have taken the leap of faith with us to help put this event on. So before we bring on our next panel and our executive editor, Philip Brasher, to moderate it, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the screens for messages from a couple of our sponsors. Thank you.
This is the America we all depend on. These are the farmers who help build it. And every day, Farm Credit is here, just as we've been for more than 100 years, supporting rural communities and agriculture with reliable, consistent credit and financial services. In good times and bad, we provide loans to America's farmers and ranchers, farmer-owned cooperatives, rural homebuyers, agribusinesses, and rural infrastructure providers. From spring thaw to first frost and all the weather in between, Farm Credit understands the challenges and rewards that come with farming. We help agricultural producers feed the world and rural economies thrive. Our infrastructure lending helps provide rural towns with access to clean water, modern telecommunications, and reliable energy, ensuring rural families and businesses have the resources they need to prosper. We're cooperatives, locally owned and governed by our customers. So our commitments go beyond finances. We are deeply engaged members of our communities, supporting local 4-H and FFA chapters, farmers markets, and community services for the future of America's farmers and the food they provide to families every day. Farm Credit will be there. Learn more today.
Well, welcome back. Thanks again to Farm Credit and Syngenta for their generous support. Okay.
We rise before dawn. We prepare for the day ahead. We approach each day with determination to conquer what we can and prepare for what we can't. We work hard while finding ways to work smarter. We problem solve, seeking new solutions to the challenges we face. While our routines may look a little different, our roots are the same. We all take to our work with a sense of collective pride, united in our shared goal to persevere, to progress, and to prosper. Because together we are stronger. Together we build a better future. Together we rise.